Live. Namaste, motherfuckers. This is serious business. I'm Steven Beest. This is my friend. I'm sorry, what did you say? Your name is
Peakless Mountaineer.
Peakless Mountaineer.
Hmm.
So we're here. We're going to start with a little discussion about the incoming YouTube censorship that is happening as a result of our good friend Carlos from Vox, as well as some of our friends at the ADL as well. That was recently reported on by Adam Green of No More News. Shout out to him. If you haven't watched his stuff, go watch his stuff. He's a good enough guy. So, yeah, what are your thoughts about all this YouTube censorship? Like, what's your general takeaway offhand?
Boy, I could have seen this coming.
Oh yeah. It's like, yep, let's do the same exact thing we did, like, what, 2 years ago? Yeah, like 2 years ago. Let's do that again.
Yep.
Because now the thing is, like, you had all of these channels, like your Sargon of Akkads and the fucking, the skeptic community. Who they were out there causing kind of a ruckus, and, like, I don't think they were intending to, but they were kind of gatekeeping for the alt-right in a lot of ways and leading a lot of people into alt-right echo chambers, either intentionally or not. So they got themselves in a little bit of trouble for that, but it would have been one thing if they got in trouble for that and then were like, sorry guys, we didn't realize that fans of ours were becoming Nazis because of the direction we're telling them to go, basically, by like encouraging them to go on, sites like 4chan and shit. Instead of doing that, they were like, no, we stand by. Like, they basically aligned themselves with the alt-right in this really weird way, which I guess isn't really uncommon when communism and fascism rolls around for the centrists to side with fascists, because really when you get down to it, fascism is just radical centrism.
Well, one of the things that I saw recently was just a set of graphs of where people's political opinions have been. And you can see that there is a slight shift for people on the right to the right, but it's this tiny little shift. Whereas on the left, it's this huge, massive shove all the way over to the left.
Oh, absolutely. The Overton window has shifted dramatically to the left culturally, but I think a lot of what's happening with the younger generation now, that's kind of backfiring. It's starting to turn in the opposite direction. And that's why I'm kind of looking towards like a more distant future, like what kind of seeds are being sown right now among the current population. Like, my question is, are we being intentionally led into a place where fascism would need to be forced on us because it would have a voting bloc?
Well, so in general, the thing that I'm seeing is they want people to be in 3 of the 4 quadrants and not really in the center. So obviously, if you're authoritarian left, that's their go-to. Like that's your, here, see what virtuous people we are, because we want, health care for everybody, and we want to stop the hate speech, etc., etc. So you've got that corner just absolutely nailed down. The authoritarian right, easy to just pick people off, because, well, you're Nazis, so, your opinion doesn't fucking matter.
Oh, yeah.
So then you've got the anti-authoritarian left, which the vast majority of them, they know exactly which buttons to push to make them hop to and basically quit being authoritarian when they want them to. So, like, when they want them to do this, they'll, act like, absolutely destructive maniacs. And when they want to push this button, well, they're going to go vote for Democrats, in spite of the fact that the Democrats they're voting for are just as pro-state as anybody.
Oh, yeah.
What they can't stand is having people in the anti-authoritarian right, because they haven't really figured out how to just nail that perspective, like how to defame it, how to make it appear ridiculous. So that's the one place that they really can't afford to have people. So if you're a centrist, they'll point to how you're so far right of what the average opinion is. And it's like, well, if for example, like one of my favorite skeptics, he actually showed his test results for that political thing, right? And he's a little bit left of center and a little bit anti-authoritarian of center.
Yeah.
But since the left has moved so far to the left recently, that means that the middle ground is no longer in the center. So he was left of center, but now the popular center has moved to the left of him. So now he's on the right. And because he's not obviously anti-authoritarian, he's clearly alt-right.
Oh, of course. Yeah, no, there's only two types of people. There's Antifas and alt-rights. There's literally nothing else. And I don't know. The thing is, like, basically libertarianism has become defamed based around, like, using buzzwords like calling it laissez-faire and calling every economic idea they don't like laissez-faire. And people have this weird idea in their head that America was ever a laissez-faire country. I don't know where the fuck they got that idea from.
Well, if you look at early America in comparison to the empires, sure.
Oh, yeah.
Compared to the British Empire, or the French Empire, or the fucking Dutch Empire, whatever. Compared to empires, sure, it's laissez-faire capitalist.
Oh, yeah.
Which is why it was an absolute boom. Like, you compared to the controls that were on that, where you had mercantilism, compared to mercantilism, it was laissez-faire, which is why you had just this absolute skyrocket economically after the country was founded.
Oh, yeah.
And then it makes all of this wealth, and of course, when you have all of this wealth and you still have a government in place, it reinforces itself until you end up with what we have now, the largest government the world has ever seen.
Oh, yeah. That's the thing. There's never been a government in history that has ever shrunk in size, at least as far as I know. I could correct me if I'm wrong about that, but I've never heard of one.
There are momentary shrinkages where they basically, it's like winding up to punch you.
Oh, yeah.
So, like, that hand is not actually going away from you. It's just winding up to hit you.
Yeah, it's just shrinking a bit only to get bigger. Yeah, I see what you mean. Yeah, that's why I just don't trust it. That's why I can't get behind the idea of minarchism, because I don't see no government's going to vote itself to be smaller.
Right.
That's another reason I can't get behind, like, the Libertarian Party in particular, is because a lot of the time it's statist means to anarchist ends, and that's just doomed for failure. The two are absolutely opposed to one another.
Yeah, pretty much. It's like fucking for chastity.
And that's the contradiction of communism as well, that communists get just consistently overlook. You can't have a dictator lead you into anarchy. It's like a lot of the ANCAP guys that turn around and start saying that we need to go through a period of fascism in order to achieve anarcho-capitalism.
Total madness.
It's like, are you fucking retarded? Did you pay attention the last time that idea was tried? Did we get anarcho-capitalism out of it?
And the real truth of this is that the only way that we're going to get out of oppression is to build our way out of oppression.
Oh, yeah.
Like, okay, the money system is completely controlled and absolutely corrupt. So, well, if you can create a different money system, then you start, being able to avoid the corrupt system. And that's the only way this is going to work. You can't have a massive increase in the government to ultimately decrease the government. Exactly. That's never happened. It's never going to happen.
No no dictator is going to willingly give up any of his or her, we're woke here, own power. It's impossible. It's never happened, and it doesn't make any sense. There's no incentive for a dictator to give up their power. power does fucked up things to people. People don't just come into power and remain the exact same person that they went into being. The greatest, if you really want to understand the way power corrupts, go watch the movie Sallow or the 120 Days of Sodom. It will change your life. It's not for everyone, but it will change your life if it is for you.
Well,
It's a pretty amazing film.
well, the fact is that power is a drug. It really is a drug. It activates your brain in exactly the same way as any addictive drug will do. So you really have to expect from politicians the behavior that you would expect from a smack addict.
Oh, absolutely.
So, okay, what are they going to do? Well, they're going to flush their lives down the toilet and anyone's life around them if that's going to get them their drug. So, yeah, I mean, and that's the thing. Sure, you start out and it's like, oh, I just do a little bit of crack on the weekends. It's fine. And very shortly afterward, it's taken over your entire life.
Oh, yeah.
And the same thing happens with power. I mean, you don't get that same initial rush that you had when you were just changing this little thing. It's like, ooh, I wanted to do this, and now that's changed in the world, and you get a rush from that. But it's never going to hit you the same way the next time. So you're going to try and get a bigger and bigger rush. You're going to try and get more and more power, and you're going to be willing to throw a little bit more under the bus to do it.
I think that's part of the reason why a lot of the people who get into power end up turning to sexual depravity. I mean, on top of the fact that a lot of the time they have to do it as sort of like a ritual sort of entrance into a lot of secret societies. Like, a lot of the time it's just because, like, they've done everything else and they're like, what else can I get away with because of the amount of power that I have?
Yeah, if you can find something that's universally abhorrent and you can get away with it, then you've proven that you're that powerful.
Oh, exactly.
And if you let the right people know about you're doing this universally abhorrent thing, then they're going to trust you a little bit more because they have blackmail on you.
Exactly. And that's what Jeffrey Epstein's island was all about, was collecting blackmail on people specifically before they ran for office so that they could completely control them. Trump went to that island. Bill Clinton went to that island. So many people went to that fucking island. Bill Clinton went to that island more than like anyone else in the world, though. Like,
Which island?
Jeffrey Epstein's pedophile island.
Huh.
He had like a bunch of sex slaves on an island, and there've been like Google Maps satellite pictures of the island that shows that there's like this weird fucking temple there too.
Hmm.
It's
Yeah, I don't know about Jeffrey Epstein's island, but I do know about like Bohemian Grove, for example.
Oh yeah.
Which I love Nixon's comedy, the faggotiest goddamn thing I've ever seen in my life.
Yeah. I don't know. The Bohemian Grove. Oh, I'm sorry. What were you saying?
Oh, I was just gonna say, but even anti-gay Nixon still had to go to the faggotiest goddamn thing he's ever seen if he wanted into the club.
Oh yeah. Or like Skull and Bones, where like what is it? You have to like sit in a coffin and next to another man masturbate and describe your first sexual experience with them. Isn't that what you have to do to get into Skull and Bones?
What I'd heard was that you have to recount every sexual experience that you've ever had in your life.
Oh, okay.
And that's one of those things where there's both the opportunity for doing something horrible and just the opportunity for being embarrassed. And if all of these people have at least something that would embarrass you if it got out, I mean, you then trust them a little bit, and they trust you, in spite of the fact that it's not any kind of virtue that you're, keeping from embarrassing each other. It's just a power game. But it lets you have this sort of false sense of trust. Like, not a virtuous trust, just oh yeah, well, I know how to stab you back.
It's like an inversion of trust.
Yeah.
It's just like everything else that's evil. It's an inversion of all that's true.
Exactly. It's like, oh yeah, well, I can keep you from getting your addiction if you cross me.
Yeah, exactly. It's like when people say that the phrase "Free Palestine" is anti-Semitic, because Palestinians are Semitic, and
Right.
a lot of the Ashkenazi Jews at the forefront of Zionism are actually not Semitic. Like Ben Shapiro. Every time Ben Shapiro calls someone anti-Semitic, you have to keep in mind that he's not an actual Semite.
Yeah, Semitic. That one comes from Shem was the Middle Eastern, the one that the son in the Bible that went to Asia, so Middle Eastern.
Yeah,
Funny how none of the Ashkenazi look Middle Eastern.
yeah, it's because they're from Russia.
Yeah, I mean, pale skin and blue eyes, those are northern traits. Those are
Uh,
not Semitic traits. And that's part of the whole confusion with you use these terms and like the more confusion that can be injected into these terms, the more that serves the power elite. Because then they can use these terms to turn on and off different emotions in different voting blocks.
exactly. Like Israel has become such a touchy issue. Like I had one video up on my Patreon, and it made a reference to the fact that all of our politicians are bought by Israel, and literally like after I posted that up, I noticed very quickly that my Patreon had been shadow banned. Just it's one of those things you're just not allowed to talk about, and I'm constantly worried about like, oh fuck, they're gonna make like the Anti-Defamation League is gonna like dedicate a web page to my YouTube channel. Like fuck. Like, but it's like at the same time, like I've never in the entire time I've been on YouTube blamed Jewish people for anything. Like the Jewish people in general as a group for anything. Like there have been times when I've pointed out crimes that have been committed by people that happen to represent the Israeli government, and the Israeli government happens to be made up primarily by Jews. So all governments are bad. It's not my fault that the government that has Jews in it also is bad.
Well, I mean, it's not like if you badmouth Egypt, someone's going to call you an anti-Hamite.
Yeah.
Like, that's not a thing.
If I were to criticize the Chinese, what is it? The Chinese social credit system, which by the way, the technology came from Israel. Uh, if I were to criticize that, that doesn't make me a Chinese hater.
Right.
That doesn't make me racist against the Chinese, and that doesn't make me a anti-Chinetic conspiracy theorist. Like that's stupid. And I've never even said that there is like a conspiracy of Jewish people. That's never been a thing on this channel because I'm aware that that's not the case. There's like a small handful of people that are Jewish in name only, not really religious Jews, who happen to be a part of a conspiracy based around Zionism, which is only one conspiracy out of several conspiracies. Basically, there's not one New World Order. There are several New World Orders that are all kind of working together and also competing with each other, using us as chess pieces in order to bring us to the New World Order. This is all stuff that people like Bill Cooper were talking about back in the day. Whenever somebody would come on a show like, it's the Jews, he'd be like, no, it's not. It's like there's a few Jews, but there's all these other people that are doing all these other things. Like, really, at the end of the day, a lot of it's just the descendants of the Roman Empire more than anything else.
Well, I mean, one thing you can always count on is that the people in power will vote to keep themselves in power.
Oh,
I mean,
absolutely. Oh,
it's like Jekyll Island, because you're probably familiar with it, and I would guess some of your viewers are familiar with Jekyll Island, where they came up with the Federal Reserve. So, like, one of the big things about that is you had these banks and these old banking families that ran these giant super banks, and they're like, well, we can't knock each other out of the market. We've tried. Since we can't knock each other out of the market, let's get together and we can all agree that there shouldn't be any new competitors. So let's put as many rules as possible in place so that A, our banks can't possibly fail, and B, no one else gets to enter the market to compete with us. I mean, it's the same as like different cable companies. Like, Turner and Comcast are against each other, but they can sure agree that you shouldn't have a bunch of options.
Oh, yeah.
Same thing with these, New World Order, Illuminati, whatever, super powerful groups. These super powerful groups, they do fight with each other, but they can always agree that one of them should win. And it certainly shouldn't be that they all lose. That's what they can agree on.
Oh, absolutely. That's the thing. Like they're all much more willing to work together, and a lot of them aren't even completely in on like the central plan. Like there's the people who are like absolutely at the absolute upper echelons of power. You could fit them in like one room. Realistically, the people who know absolutely all the ins and outs, at least as David Icke says, he knows all. He's a master.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's the Pareto principle applied to power. So, like, it's the square root principle. So, if you take, 10,000 of the most powerful people in the world, well, 100 of them are going to have half of the power. And 10 of them are going to have a quarter of that power.
Oh, yeah.
So, yeah, it's inverse square root rule. Yeah, that's how it works. So you get a smaller and smaller portion that has a bigger and bigger amount because it's a creative endeavor. All creative endeavors work that way. Out of all of the people trying to make it into the music industry, like the vast majority is this really tiny. The vast majority of music that you can get a hold of that anyone listens to is this really tiny minority of people.
Oh, yeah. That's the thing. It's just whoever rises to the top, whoever has the best plan, whoever lays it out the best, and whoever's the best funding. That's what it's all about. And yeah.
Well, I'd stop you on that one. It's not just a matter of funding. Like funding is a huge part of it, and it's very important, but it's also about trust. So, for example, one of the big revolutions that we're going through right now is that people are turning away from the mainstream media. I mean, we used to have, X number of television channels, and they're all owned by like a maximum of like 5-6 companies.
Huh.
And sure, that's a lot of money. It's definitely a lot of money, but it's nowhere near as much money as, say, the top 5 banking corporations. But what they do have is influence and trust. So that if all 5 of those are pitching this, whatever idea, like people will buy it. And that's not because they have so much money. Money's part of it. I mean, if they didn't have the money, they couldn't afford, the studios and satellites and all of that stuff. But they also have the influence and the trust. Whereas now, we've been lied to about so many things for so long that some people are turning into flat earthers. And at this point, so many people are turning away from that because of how much they've lied. It's like, okay, well, you lied to us about this, and that got us into a war. And you lied to us about that, and that got us into a war. And now you're trying to get us into another war. What are the chances that you're lying to me?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Like everything surrounding the build-up against Iran, it's all bullshit. Like, they're literally, why would Iran go out and attack Saudi Arabian oil pipelines when they know for a fact that it's basically suicide for them? It makes no fucking sense.
Well, the same reason that Assad would gas his own people, of course.
Oh, of course. Yeah, that made just as much sense as well.
And, especially at that time, because I'm not saying he has, a great, moral compass or anything, but the timing of that was just absolutely ridiculous. Like, why would you cross the one line where you politically can't be left alone?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, and that one's fun because we've had an engineering report that came out, but wasn't included in the official report. So the official report, like the people sent to do this, the engineers specifically say this can't have been dropped by a plane, but that doesn't get included in the official press release. So anyone who releases that information, they get defamed. Oh, they're a conspiracy theorist.
Oh yeah.
Because I told you what the engineers that you sent to look at this told us about it.
Oh, the bullshit is amazing, and so it's becoming so easy to see through at this point. Like even the boomers are starting to wake up. It's amazing. Like I don't know. I think a big wake up call for a lot of people was the Ilhan Omar thing. That was a big thing that like shook a lot of people, at least on the Trump supporting side, out of supporting the state. And there's a lot of Democrats too got shaken out of their support for both the mainstream media as well as the Democratic Party in response to the backlash that Ilhan Omar received over her criticism of APAC.
How did that shake the faith in Trump and on one side and in the mainstream on the other?
You see, with the right wing, there was a group, there was a large group of like right wingers that supported Trump that were like Alex Jones fans, conspiracy theorists. I count myself as like a part of this group
Mm-hmm.
who like after like learning more about like these about like Israel and all the connections that Trump had to Israel, it got me like very suspicious of Trump and got a lot of other people very suspicious of Trump across the internet as well. And then the Ilhan Omar thing happened. Trump came out and was like, "These comments are anti-Semitic and horrible and evil. She should resign. This and that." And that's really when everyone realized, like, okay, no, you can't just keep explaining shit away with 4D chess. Like, he's literally just lying right now. And then you had literally, I unsubscribed from so many YouTube channels after that event happened just because of all, there's any of them that called her anti Semitic. I was like, well, you're lying. Peace out. Because it's not anti Semitic to point out that APAC owns all of our politicians. Like, that's just true. It's provably true.
Yeah.
They admit it, they brag about it. There's been undercover documentaries exposing all of this.
Well, and I mean, this is textbook racial bias. Like, okay, you have one racial group, which you get these massive attacks if anything connected to them is ever criticized. Now, this is not true of, obviously, it's not true of anyone in European. It's also not true of anyone Asian or Native American or African. It's not true of any other group where any organization affiliated with them, you get blasted with the accusations of racism.
Oh,
Like
yeah.
you can criticize, you can criticize Ethiopia until you're blue in the face, and no one's going to say, "Oh, you're anti-black."
Oh,
No
yeah.
one's going to do that.
I mean, that does happen with Obama, but to a lesser extent. Where it's like if you criticize Obama to like somebody who's still like a religious supporter of Obama, and then eventually when all their other lines of defense for Obama end up not working when faced with reality, they always just turn to, yeah, well, it seems like a lot of people that don't like him just don't like him because he's black. And I don't know, when people say that to me, I think, no, you've got it backwards. You only like him because he's black. And you assume
Mm,
that everybody else is judging him based on the same thing you are.
yeah, projection.
Yeah,
That one's
exactly.
projection. Yeah. And that's the thing. It's like, okay, well, how about the criticism that I've found him indistinguishable from Bush?
Oh,
Because frankly, I found him indistinguishable from Bush. It's like, oh no, he started stepping toward universal health care. You mean like Romney did?
yeah.
So, yeah, and
Do you know how long the Affordable Care Act is? It's like thousands of pages long. It's literally impossible for any human being to read that entire book, to read the entire act. Like, even if you had time to, like, who would have the will to read thousands of pages like that? That's unbelievable.
Well, I mean, I think it was Ron Paul that would every time he'd put forth a motion that you would actually have to read the bill before you vote on it, and he would just get laughed out of Congress.
Oh yeah, no. Ron Paul, like, he was like the only dude who was okay in the government for a long time. And now there's Rand Paul, who's the only dude who's okay now, but he's like slightly less okay.
Yeah,
But
he's watered down enough that he doesn't lose his position in this world.
yeah,
But
oh yeah. Essentially, Rand Paul is more like a real like paleo conservative, like who really sticks to his principles. He's not really a libertarian the way
right,
Ron Paul was. And
right.
honestly, like I've heard a lot of people say that Ron Paul is low key an anarchist who just doesn't want to admit it, and I can kind of see it.
Well, I mean, it's a fair accusation because if you take anti-authoritarian to its fullest extent, you get anarchist.
Oh yeah, I,
So he is definitely very libertarian.
oh absolutely. My favorite quote from him ever is, "I lean towards a flat tax rate, like really flat, like zero." It's fucking great.
Yeah, I have this completely radical idea that we actually end slavery instead of having a piecemeal slavery. Like you own your body and its effects, except for like 30% of the good effects that we like. Those belong to the government.
Yep.
Like the government doesn't own 30% of the things that you break. That it doesn't own.
Yeah. No. I mean, no. The government, it just has to take 30% of your income to build bombs to blow up children in Gaza because it's the price we pay to live in a civilized society.
Right?
Yeah. You gotta kill a few children to live in a civilized society. You know what I mean? That's
Yeah.
why every night I go out and I always do at least like 3 abortions before I go to bed, just to make sure that my society stays nice and civilized. I figure I get them real young, then I get like the longest period of civilized time from that. But I don't know. Hopefully, I'll be able to start stealing people's money soon to do it. It's getting really annoying after spending my own money on all this abortion equipment.
Well, I think it's really interesting that the presidents we've elected since 9/11 have had a strong anti-war stance. Like 9/11 happened, W obviously, got his other term. But then, okay, Obama, he was our anti-war candidate, which, okay, yeah, compared to McCain, probably was. I mean, God only knows what McCain would have done. I assume more.
Yeah.
But, record number of drone strikes isn't exactly peaceful for
Actually, Trump stopped it.
Really?
Yeah, Trump topped it in his first 2 years in office.
Wow.
In fact, actually, I think just in the first year in office. And then he actually issued an executive order to make the government stop counting casualties by drone strike.
Well, that's one way to keep his record intact, I guess.
Dude, yeah, 4D chess at its finest. Where we go one, we go all, am I right?
Yeah. And that's the thing, like from a business perspective, wars are a huge loss.
Oh yeah.
I mean, you don't make money off of breaking things.
Yeah, the people who argue that war is good for the economy, they're either lying or they're just stupid. Like, it depends really on how much money they have, basically. Like, the more money they have, the more likely it is that they're just lying and that they're being paid to say what they're saying.
Well, the only benefits of war to the economy could be equally done if we created things that didn't kill people with that money.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, let's devote the entire, all of the money going to bombing people to creating Fabergé eggs.
Yeah.
And then you'll have just as much economic stimulus and fewer corpses.
It's like what Bill Hicks said. Like, couldn't we use the same technology to just shoot food at hungry people?
Attach a sandwich to the tip of it, and bam, right down the chimney into the guy's mouth.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it makes perfect sense to me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, yeah. I mean, the one form of socialism that no Republican will ever say anything about is if it's killing people.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, obviously, we need socialism for killing people.
Yeah. It's like when Ben Shapiro says that taxation is theft, but he only says taxation is theft when it's coming from like a left winger. It's like, make up your mind, asshole. I remember hearing someone saying
Never.
like in an article not too long ago that the phrase taxation is theft is a Republican slogan. I wanted to fucking kill myself. It's Republicans need to stop appropriating our culture. They'll never be as cool as us. Like, there's a whole lot of Republicans out there that smoke weed that think they're libertarians, and I used to be one of them. But it's like you're not a libertarian. If you think that Donald Trump should nationalize the internet, like that's just a terrible idea. I can't believe I have to explain to people now in our modern society after a few years ago the entire internet was up in arms over SOPA and PIPA. I can't believe I have to explain to people now why government regulation of the internet is a bad thing.
Yeah, that's one of the wild things. Like, what I thought we would be fighting about was the internet. I thought that was going to be like right now our big, huge, everyone in an uproar and at each other's throats over it. I thought it was going to be whether or not the internet should be free, of government regulation. And I thought that what was going to happen was that we all knew that free speech was important because otherwise we can't kill bad ideas. We would all know that that was important. We'd know that was part of our culture. We'd know that was why we put it as Amendment number 1, and that's why we would get to keep the internet. Instead, we are having a conversation about hate speech, which that is a really powerful set of words.
Oh, yeah.
Because the only speech that needs to be defended is the kind that pisses people off.
Oh, absolutely. The first hate speech laws were introduced in the USSR. In fact, political correctness, does it come from Lenin? I think the term politically correct comes from either Leninism or Maoism. It probably comes from Leninism, but is then mentioned in Maoism as well. But yeah, that's the entire concept is tanky bullshit, essentially. If you know what tanky means,
No.
it's authoritarian left wing, like
Huh.
Stalinist, basically. They
Huh.
they're called tankies.
Well, they used to at least pretend to be anti-war, but yeah. And one of the things that I worry about is like, okay, so right now, with all of the deplatforming, we don't get the opportunity to soundly beat and then ridicule people with terrible ideas like white supremacy. So that means that we are atrophying the muscular ability to make them ridiculous. And if we lose the ability to make these terrible fucking ideas ridiculous, then they're going to start sounding not ridiculous later on. And the next set of people is not going to automatically know that those are stupid bad.
Oh yeah, that's the whole problem. Like I've been able to successfully debate fascists and like the like before. Just because like I'm not even that smart of a guy, but it's just it doesn't take much effort a lot of the time to like diffuse most of their arguments. Like for instance, there's specific genetic diseases that only affect Jewish people because of how racially homogenous they are. You're telling me that an ethno state wouldn't have that problem exasperated by like 1,000? And then beyond that, like a lot of them cling to this idea of Hitler being the savior who saved us all from the evil conspiracy, which like they're right that the Rothschilds are at the helm of a massive banking conspiracy, but they blame the entire race of people for what the one dude and like his cabal of people are doing.
And
But
conveniently didn't manage to get the Rothschilds out of power during it.
yeah, and I point out to this guy, I'm like, you realize that Hitler was funded by the Rothschilds. Like, it was documented. There was a historian who worked for the Rothschild family, who he was hired to write their entire family history, and he published it publicly, which they didn't want to have happen. So then they retracted the books and re-released an edited version of it. But in either the original version or the edited version of the book, it's revealed that the Rothschilds funded Hitler into power. And, he responds like, oh, well, you gotta grease your hands, rub it up against blah, 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 blah. I'm like, yeah, I don't buy that. The Rothschilds don't fund people by accident. And you look at all these a lot of the white nationalist guys that started coming out of the woodwork around the time Trump started coming around. Let's start with Steve Bannon, he's not really a white nationalist, but he was one of the guys who pushed the alt-right into the mainstream, the editor at Breitbart. He is a former Goldman Sachs banker turned full-time Zionist shill who attends Zionist Organization of America meetings. He's pushing like the alt-right and Trump and all these people into the mainstream. Then you have Richard Spencer, actual white nationalist. There's a lot of rumors about Richard Spencer. First of all, I personally don't think that he's really an ethno-nationalist. And the reason I believe that, I think is pretty bulletproof. You'll notice that when he's in a debate, if he gets asked about like, so how do you measure whiteness? He always goes like, well, you just look at them. And like he'll be like, oh, well, how do you tell maybe they're like Jewish or something? And he's like, oh, no, you can tell a Jew apart from a white guy. Funny thing, you look into his family tree, 1/16 Ashkenazi Jew.
Wow.
How can you be a white nationalist and have Ashkenazi Jew blood in you? He's also a Zionist. He's open about that. He calls the alt-right Zionism for white people, regularly compares his ideal ethno-state to Israel. He said if he and Benjamin Netanyahu had a beer together, they would probably agree on everything. And apparently his wife thinks he's gay.
Wow.
I also found a picture of him posing with, I don't know what the appropriate word is for this, so I'm just gonna, it's men who look like women. And you can find it on Google if you just look up Richard Spencer traps. And yeah, he also posed for a picture with Laura Bush one time, and he has connections through the National Policy Institute, which was founded by the son of a Republican insider, the guy who's published a bunch of books written by people in the Republican Party, including Trump. I don't know if he's published anything written by Trump, but he's published a bunch of books about Trump. Sarah Palin wrote for him. Mike Pence wrote for him. Bunch of major Republican authors and politicians wrote books that he published. His son founded the National Policy Institute, which Richard Spencer is the president of. That's a direct line to the Republican Party.
Wow.
Then of course you have Jared Taylor. There's a little less dirt on him. He went to Yale University, which that's only a little sketchy because like Yale tends to be a CIA recruiting ground. It's also where Skull and Bones is.
I was gonna say.
And like I can't find any proof that he's actually CIA, but he is a Zionist and he's open about that too. So again, a white nationalist Zionist doesn't make fucking sense. Absolutely no sense at all. It's like something strange here.
Yeah, that's super weird.
And he had a ultra Zionist rabbi speak at one of his events too.
Huh.
Super weird. He also kicked David Duke out of one of his events for bringing up the you-know-who's. And speaking of David Duke, he's the next one I was going to mention. Obviously, he was in like the Ku Klux Klan. I'm guessing you know who David Duke is.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you know, he was in the Ku Klux Klan, promoted the Klan like no one else, helped build bombs and shit. He was basically a terrorist. And now he's like this highly educated, like PhD in history, like white nationalist who just so happens to have been involved in a CIA operation in 1981 called Operation Red Dog, where the CIA sent him and a bunch of other Ku Klux Klan members to go make a white nationalist tribe in the Dominican Republic. But he decided that he was going to skip out on it, and then everyone else involved in it got caught. He went to court, pled the fifth, and walked away. Everyone else got jail time.
Wow.
Once a spook, always a spook, though. That's the thing. As soon as, like, and then there's Robert David Steele, another guy who rose up around Trump, who is openly ex-CIA, which makes him different. But it's interesting, though, that he and David Duke are both, like, rabid anti-Zionists to, like, a kind of radical extent. Not so much Robert David Steele, but David Duke especially, where he's more anti-Semitic, really, than anti-Zionist at the end of the day. But it's just interesting that the CIA shills are the ones that are, like, being sent out to push the anti-Zionist, to act as anti-Zionist intellectuals and leaders in anti-Zionist thought and the white nationalist movement in America or whatever. And it's such an obvious psyop. It's so obviously being done to prevent legitimate criticism of Israel and from keep the crimes that the state has committed under wraps.
Well, that's a clusterfuck of evil.
Oh yeah, it's amazing. I mean, it kind of fits though, because the CIA did help get the Nazis over from Germany into America. They also released a document in 2017 showing that there was evidence that Hitler escaped. Like, it includes a picture that a guy took with Hitler in 1951 in South America. I can't remember which country, if it was like Argentina or whatever. But yeah, it got declassified 2017. So, I mean, it looks a lot like Hitler. I can't say for sure if it was. I don't know if they ever went after him. Probably not. But, I mean, yeah. That means they at least had evidence he was alive.
We can't seem to find his corpse anywhere, so that's interesting.
Oh, yeah. Like, what the corpse that we found turned out to be like a 40-year-old woman.
Yeah.
Well, that Russia had. Because they had it in a museum claiming that it was
Yes,
Hitler's.
we have his body, and then we test it, and no, you don't.
Yeah. It happens, you know, the dictator that gets demonized worse than any other dictator in history. Like, yeah, he died. Yeah, we never found the body, but it doesn't matter that much. Don't think about it too hard. Seriously, don't think about it too hard, or we'll put you on a higher dose of Adderall.
I think it's far more interesting how much fascism won that war.
Oh, absolutely.
And I mean, I don't know, like, so I've recently run into this chunk of data about, so like all of the different layers and levels of government and all of their different, this union and this union and this set of employees and all of that, and how each and every one of them have these retirement accounts, right? And all those retirement accounts have pretty much exclusively Fortune 500 companies in there. So, like, if you, and I have no idea how much labor it would actually take to add this all up, but I honestly wonder, because I've always said that we live under economic fascism now, because at least as Mussolini defined it, fascism was where you had nominal private ownership, but you had government control.
Yeah.
And I've always said that that's the economic system we have now. And I'm starting to wonder if we even have nominal private ownership, given how much the layers of government actually literally own these major companies.
Oh, absolutely. And the thing is, like, really, at the end of the day, as long as there's a state, there's no such thing as private property, because at any point in time, the state can just declare your private property completely invalid. Like, all these rights that the government has written down for us, they don't actually exist. They only exist as long as we are willing to stand up and fight to protect them. Which at this point in time, we've been raised to a point as a society through whether it's through all the poison in our food, all the pills that we're being put on, all the fucking screens that are being put in front of us, causing us to get all lazy and inactive and shit. We're nowhere near in a position to defend ourselves if the state came after us or if the state collapsed. If the system fell apart now, like, so many people would be completely fucked, and I include myself there. I would be fucked too. Like, I'm not in any way in a great position for the government to fall apart, but I mean, hey, at least I acknowledge it. Fuck.
Well, and this is why we really have to grow our way out of it. And so we kind of started on YouTube and their censorship and all of that. So that was one of the like deeply, deeply disappointing things when I watched Alex Jones get kicked off of everything. When Alex Jones got kicked off of everything, it was a perfect opportunity for him to pick one. Just pick one. Pick an alternative and say, I will be here. You know, it wasn't. I know that he had some agreements with some of them that they would absolutely always host his content. So if he just picked one, said, look, I'm going to be here. They're kicking me out of this. They're kicking me out of all these things, but I'm going to be on this, you know, like BitChute or whatever.
I mean, he is on BitChute. I know that. But,
well, sure, he's on them, but he didn't tell anyone.
BitChute's just like, it's become such a like unpopular website right now. That's the only real problem with it. The only reason I don't use it personally is because I can't live stream on it. If I was able to do that, I'd already be over there. Just because YouTube
I'm just picking one out of a hat, like, you know, Vimeo, whatever. Like, if he just picked one, then it would have been. He's so well known, and this was such an obvious case of censorship that everyone would have started moving their content to whichever one he had picked.
Oh, absolutely.
And all of these, well, you know, it's only a matter of time before YouTube bans me too. I'm going to start uploading my stuff to YouTube and whichever this other one.
Yeah.
And
I mean, the other thing about Alex Jones is, I'm not sure if you've seen me talk about Alex Jones on this channel a whole lot, but, like, he's basically a shill. Like, I've seen substantial evidence proving to me that Alex Jones is gatekeeping to prevent legitimate criticism of Israel. Because there was a guy who, back in the early 2000s, went on InfoWars, and right before his interview, Alex Jones told him, because he was a well-known anti-Zionist advocate, he told him beforehand, like, you can't talk about Zionism, you can't talk about Jewish supremacy, or I'll get kicked off the radio.
Well, for all the good that did him.
Yeah, exactly. But it's become so obvious, and that's something that channel I was shouting out earlier, No More News. That's something that he's covered extensively. He has like 37 videos just about InfoWars, just exposing Alex Jones and all the, like, he literally said one time that the Saudis run the central banks.
Well, and I mean, I'm not trying to say that he's, you know, this saint or anything, but I do know this. He's been targeted publicly.
Yeah.
There's no question about the fact that the media cabal has specifically kicked him out all at once. Yeah. And they're starting to gear up to do that to people. And that's the thing. Like, he's far out there.
I think they mainly did it to Alex Jones because more than anything they wanted to bring attention to Alex Jones, to kind of keep people trapped in the box that Alex Jones creates and keep them from exploring beyond that. If you get what I mean. He's like a honeypot sort of, but not in the same exact way. He like gets people trapped in there, but not to like get caught by the police, just to keep them from like going out and seeing what else there is to the story. He's like a filter that you have to get through, and a lot of people don't really get through. But that's the whole thing. Like, he's such an obvious case of controlled opposition. And in fact, there was a movie with a really eerie scene Keanu Reeves movie called Scanner Darkly. You ever heard of it?
Oh yeah, I saw that one.
Yeah, you know the Alex Jones scene in that movie? Do you remember that?
Oh, it's been a while now.
There's a scene in it where they literally have Alex Jones on a street corner with a megaphone shouting about, like, wake up and see the tyranny, like, be free, open your eyes, all this shit. And then a van pulls up, a bunch of cops jump out, electrocute him, knock him out, and throw him in the back of the van.
Hmm.
I don't know. It's just it's creepy. It's really creepy thinking about that now. Like when you compare how he used to talk about Zionism back in the day versus now, how he won't even touch the subject, and he'll call anyone who does anti-Semitic. Like he even came out and called Ilhan Omar anti-Semitic.
Wow. I
Yeah.
hadn't.
Like I said, these are all the reasons I think he's a shill. He called her word for word David Duke crossed with Adolf Hitler. That's how he described Ilhan Omar.
Wow.
And he's just, I don't know if you've watched any of his stuff recently, but it's literally just wall to wall pro Trump coverage. So it's all just part of this big trick that was put into place basically with Trump to get as many people who are like out there seeking the real truth, just to get them stuck in one spot for as long as possible. And it gives you this cult of personality to behind the whole Trump movement, because there's this weird sort of mimetic cult surrounding Trump of people who like share fucking like 4chan memes just involving Trump with each other on the internet. And it kind of makes you not want to stop supporting Trump, even when you start seeing mounting evidence of the fact that he's a piece of shit. You just want to hang on to it for the meme. And I understand that, but eventually you gotta move. Eventually you gotta move along and realize that a cigar is a cigar.
Well, the one thing that I wonder about is whether getting a Trump in office is going to take the wind out of people's sails that seriously want these changes. Like, I mean, yeah, you did it. You got an outsider in. Congratulations for all the fucking good it did us. Like, what's different exactly?
Literally nothing. Like the only substantial difference between the Republicans and the Democrats is the tax code. Other than that, basically everything stays the same. Also, the Democrats tend to be able to get away with a little bit more. Like a Democratic president, just because of the way that the media is tilted. And I think that that's being done on purpose too. Because it's kind of set up Fox News to look like this underdog sort of thing, which helps garner support for Trump and by giving him the same sort of light, even though both are completely corporate owned. Like,
well, I mean, so here's, just a quick thought experiment. Let's say that you're a Republican in America, and you would like to watch a TV news station that is not Fox. What do you do?
Yeah, you go on the internet.
Right.
Yeah.
Like, that's it. And that's a huge part of how they can pull off this underdog mystique. So that, and it's beautiful because it serves like diabolical, really, because it serves both narratives. Because on the left, they don't think they're that far left. Like, it's amazing. It's bizarre that like they've gone way to the left. That all of this information, all of this data will show that their whole thing has gone way out there. And part of it is because we don't know exactly where the line of when you've gone too far left is. Right. Like, we don't have something like, oh, you're a white nationalist. Well, fuck you. You're too far to the right.
And a lot of people just don't think that there's such a thing as too far left. There's a lot of people see the left as inherently good and the right as inherently bad. And it's the same way the other way around, too. It happens a lot where the right thinks that the left is inherently good or bad and the right is inherently good. And both are pretty much wrong because there's like a couple of good ideas in both.
Yeah, so I wanted to bring this one up. So, like, I just heard this clip from Tucker Carlson that just, like, made my head spin, where
Oh yeah.
he was saying like that most people really want they want nationalist economic policy and social policies that are more traditional, and my head nearly exploded because like something that's been like I found out has been said since like God the 70s maybe, and that I've definitely found true in my personal life, like just talking to people, is that I find that most people actually have more of an anti-authoritarian bent to them than even they tend to know about.
Oh
That
yeah.
most people tend to not care what you do in your own home, and most people want, small businesses to be left alone.
Yeah, exactly. Most people want the same basic things. It's just a lot of people don't really, they haven't read deep enough into a lot of these things and they don't know how to like flesh them out into principles. And more importantly, they're not confident enough to defend their principles on
Mm.
in any sort of meaningful way. So they end up selling out to one of the two parties. But it's about reading and trying to understand how everything works and just trying to spread awareness to people because at the end of the day, voting doesn't make a fucking difference anymore. So the only thing that's going to really change anything is just changing the minds of as many people as we can at once. But yeah, it's getting a little late, so I think I'm gonna wrap up the stream. Is there anything you wanted to close on?
Yeah, I wanted to point out that like as you point out, like if the government wants a company to be taken down, they can take them down. They can sell all their shares in that stock. They can, on every single level, they can remove the corporate protections that exist. So, everyone's using this libertarian argument about, oh, well, we should just let this company, use its free speech. And it's like, well, this company is an extension of the government. Why are we treating it differently?
It's true. Because corporations wouldn't exist without legally recognized corporate personhood.
Exactly. You withdraw that, and you will absolutely destroy even Google.
Oh, absolutely. Because no one will want to use you. If people don't like you as people and the way that you run your company, then they'll go to someone else who can provide a good or better service for the same price, slightly more or even less.
Well, and I mean, you'll lose all of the leadership that you have, because if if you will be held accountable for your own actions directly as a human being instead of indirectly through this limited liability corporation, like your hands are tied. Like you can actually go to jail for making the wrong call,
Oh
and
yeah,
no one's going to want that job.
exactly. All right, well, I'm gonna go ahead and kill the live stream then. It's
All right.
it's great to have you on again. What did you say your name was? I'm sorry.
Peakless Mountaineer.
Peakless Mountaineer. It's great to have you on. Hopefully, we'll have you on again. Maybe we'll have more guests on in the future. Anybody, as usual, I'll have other shows with open phone call discussions at the end. This was just a special little interview. I want to get back to doing the more like normal thing that I do, just presenting the news of the day every Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. I will get back to that in the future. It's just been kind of a weird few weeks for me because I'm kind of adjusting my mind to the fact that I have to read about Iran every day, and that's kind of hard to do. So, yeah, thank you all for tuning in. Like, share, subscribe, leave a comment below. Thank you all so much. Good night.